Education is what's important. Training, preparation for the expected. Education, preparation for the unexpected.
Good morning, Team Krulak community, and on behalf of Marine Corps University, the Marine Corps University Foundation, and the Krulak Center for Innovation and Future Warfare, welcome back to the BruteCast, our series designed to connect the worlds of the warfighter and PME with the best in innovative and creative thought. I'm your host, Major Ian Brown, Operations Officer at the Krulak Center. Before we begin, please remember that all the opinions expressed here are those of the individual and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Krulak Center, Marine Corps University, the United States Marine Corps, or any other agency of the U.S. government. So today we are continuing our special focus on Russia and Ukraine. And to help us with that, I'm very happy to welcome back for his third appearance on the BruteCast, the very first guest that we had on the series, Dr. Christopher C. Harmon. Dr. Harmon is lead author or editor of 7 books and has done extensive research into several British archives with a special focus on Allied coalition warfare and Winston Churchill. He has long been a part of the Marine Corps University community, having taught at Expeditionary Warfare School, Command and Staff College, and the Marine Corps War College. Dr. Harmon also previously held the Bren Chair of Great Power Competition at the Krulak Center and is currently one of the Krulak Center's esteemed distinguished fellows. Today, he'll be talking to us on a special topic entitled "The Disturbing Parallel Between Aggressive Activity Seen Under the Russian President Today as compared with some parallels in the mid-20th century." So, Dr. Harmon, thank you very much for being here, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Major Brown. There is a real value in thinking along historical parallels, and there can be a little danger in a parallel drawn artificially. In Vladimir Putin's decade of aggression against the Ukrainian people, I see a limited but also instructive historical parallel with German actions against neighbors in the 1930s. What's happening in Europe now and what happened in the 1930s illuminates much about us, about the democratic West, not just about foreign despots. The problem today is a Russian strategy combining force, threats of force, diplomacy, and time. The purpose of their combination is to weary and befuddle all those who want to see European rights respected but are now Russia's opponents. Moscow's strategy is working. Why? Because we already see Russian newspaper accounts about disorganization or disunity in the West, because we see weakness and some ambivalence in statements of presidents from the Ukraine's Vladimir Zelensky to America's Joe Biden. Putin is confronting us with a complex strategy. It goes way beyond a tally of tanks on the border. The effect has been a kind of limited demoralization. Despite taking some useful actions, the Ukrainians, the Americans, and others are not doing as well as they ought to. And in psychological, political, and military terms, Putin is ahead, and he's poised to strike if he wants to. And I'm troubled by recalling how Adolf Hitler, for his part, confided before dismembering the Republic of Czechoslovakia that he was exerting such fierce pressures on them, quote, to destroy the nerves of those gentlemen in Prague, unquote. And he did. He did before invading. He did destroy nerves in Prague and in London and in Paris, all before sending forces in. Putin's target is Kiev, although, of course, his strategy does not require him to capture that city physically. Now, let's pause and assert the obvious. Russia is not totalitarian. It's not a fully militarized society. It is an absolute despotism, however, and its spies and armies will do what they're told, and neither Zelensky nor the U.S. can fully know Putin's intentions. Putin does not rave like Hitler did. Putin's a cold character, but they too can be aggressors. You think that Putin wants to take over the whole world or even all of Europe, and he cannot. Moscow faces opponents stronger than Berlin did in the 1930s. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization has powers the League of Nations never had, if NATO decides to use those powers. So there's no easy overlay of our world onto that of 9 decades back. But of greater concern to me are the similarities. Consider the historical parallels in pretexts, policies, postures, and the whole process via strategic steps. Germany under Hitler created pretexts with overheated rhetoric and foreign subversion. Only then came invasion. German-speaking peoples were never the property of Berlin, but Hitler acted as though they were. Most did not long for unification with the German state, but he said they did. German speakers in Czechoslovakia, Poland, Austria were not treated as slaves. Every one of those countries was a republic. But Hitler asserted that all the German speakers beyond his borders were enduring the tortures of tyranny. This was called irredentism at the time, and Hitler did not merely take advantage of where it grew, he ginned it up. He used information war. He formalized disruptive processes, and he spent German state resources, and he created whole dissident structures that had not existed before across the borders. These became proxies who crowed for liberation by blood brethren in Germany. Putin has been acting similarly in the region for years, and especially in the Ukraine. Putin has appointed himself protector. Anyone with Russian genes or Russian blood. We hear of the near abroad, we hear of a concept called the Russian world, which must be protected by Putin. Putin dared to make a big speech about irredentism and his foreign duties right after annexing the Crimea in 2014. Well, Boris Yeltsin, by contrast, when he was president of Russia, knew plenty about the near abroad. What did he do? He made a treaty of friendship and cooperation in 1997 with the Ukraine, which stressed the territorial integrity of both countries, the sovereignty of both countries. Now, consider Nazi policy. Germany's expansion was forecast in Mein Kampf, but then such policy was usually denied in the late 1930s, even as it was being carried out. So convincing for many was this verbal cover. Some pacifists and neutrals in the West were completely persuaded. Hitler called for force and even conquest when he needed to. But then when Western prelates or journalists or prime ministers came anxiously to meet him, he calmed them down and claimed modest ends. Cynically, he confided in one closed meeting with German journalists in November 1938 that circumstances have, quote, obliged me to speak for a decade or more of almost nothing but peace. Only, in fact, by continuously declaring the German desire for peace have I been able, step by step, to secure freedom for the German people and to provide Germany with armaments, which have, time and time again, always been the essential precondition for any further move. So declared Hitler in private. But Putin denies interest in war too, and he probably does not want war. If I may take liberties with Winston Churchill's words about Hitler's method, he'd prefer not to smash the banquet table and take all the prime meats, but to have those served up to him course by course, calmly. Russian policy is not for war, it's for a much larger sphere of influence plus immediate acquisitions. Putin has taken 2 border areas of Georgia and all of Crimea. In such places, good people are not wrestling with their souls asking, what are Putin's intentions? They know. They're already new subjects of Moscow. Posture. Hitler and Putin have chosen the strategic offensive while consistently speaking of it as the strategic defensive. Remember that the wrongs of Versailles supposedly left a Germany that must arm, must grow, or would die. A false argument. Faced with NATO's eastward expansion, Putin keeps saying that he just does only what is required. He does what he must. But many of the countries Russia's been suborning in recent years are not in NATO, and they've not been offered NATO's friendship membership. Most are former Soviet states. They were once acquired by Moscow by force. They were freed in the early 1990s, and now they may be reacquired by force by Moscow. Ukraine is no more a country that would attack Russia than it is one longing for Anschluss with Moscow. So Putin is making warfare in peacetime with rhetoric, cyber weapons, army maneuvers, reinforcing the borders that the Ukraine has never threatened from the Ukrainian side. The posture is openly intimidating, and the specter of war has many people frightened. War does frighten. Threatening it is designed to make the opponents malleable. If Putin could get troops in without fighting, he will. He just did so in Kazakhstan briefly. If it will take a border war, Putin's in good position now. He may go for the capital, he may well not. He may even move in a different direction we don't expect while everyone's staring due east. And having caused a crisis, Putin can also just back down now, make everybody relieved. Hitler always allowed a comforting pause before snatching his next victim. Putin is studying the White House, measuring us before measuring his next step. The president of Russia's options include backing off, looking magnanimous. In a year, maybe somebody will nominate him for a peace prize, for the Nobel Peace Prize. This crisis is ours. It isn't necessarily a crisis for Putin. He can use it and put it away, or he can use it and escalate. The point is to make others fret and perhaps do his will in the hope of saving peace or saving most of their country. Not all bullies are like Hitler in a rage. The smartest of them know how to deploy diplomats as quickly as visible anger. Process, the steps in the strategy. Up until 1941, Hitler was a clever strategist whose successes surprised and impressed even his own generals, even the skeptics. His step-by-step approach, as he called it, as Churchill called it, used patience and diplomacy and martial preparations. So after winning key votes in the Saarland, he just took over the Rhineland, vacating part of the post-World War I accords that had demilitarized the Rhineland. He could claim it was German territory, and it was. Apologists for Putin, for their part, say that since the Crimea was once Russian, it must remain so, which is not logical, it's not morally compelling, and it neglects Ukraine's recent years as a republic. And after the Rhineland, which was taken in 1936, then Hitler took Austria, digested, and then moved into the Sudetenlands of the Czechs. Publicly, he promised no further territorial demands, as if he had any right to take lands thus far. Privately at that time, taking the Sudetenlands, he gloated. He gloated about acquiring a long, famous line of important Czech fortresses on the border without firing a shot. And he did. And soon enough, he swallowed the rest of the Czech state. After every reassurance, after every theft, I should say, there were always reassurances. So with half of Poland taken in 1939, guess what Hitler said? He addressed, quote, the gentlemen of the great British Empire, and he told them, the aims of Germany are closely limited. It will calm you to learn that Germany did not want to conquer the Ukraine. Of course not. He would do that later on schedule. France was reassured. France was assured that Hitler had no lust for Alsace-Lorraine, even if everyone in Europe knew that there were many German speakers there, and in fact it had been within Germany at one time. So always the reassurances about limited wars while always taking limited territories. The people in the 1930s were relieved, many of them, or even grateful. The painful process had made the victims more supple. What has Putin done? He snatched pieces from the living body of Georgia. He's sent into eastern Ukraine special forces and other mercenaries and allies, a kind of informal, localized occupation. Russia captured whole something as large and critical as the Crimea. That move in 2014 tore open the economic vestments of the Ukrainian people. It permanently altered the Sea of Azov and Black Sea situations. And above all, it robbed Kiev of a massive national territory and depth in defense. Putin isn't just threatening Ukraine with aggression today, he's been succeeding by it repeatedly. How many slices must be carved away from Kiev before hope of national sovereignty just vanishes? We have to ask, is this so unlike Germany taking its first slice of the Czech state, the Sudetenlands, after which Hitler paused and said he had no further territorial demands? For the moment, then, there was no war. Folks were relieved. 6 months later, he ate up Bohemia and Moravia, the rest of the Czech Republic. Then again, there was no war, and folks were relieved. Then, well, you know the rest. Step by step was the method for Germany, and in a limited way now for Russia. Each step weakens the opponents. Each step makes the observers even more passive. Each step leaves the aggressors with new lands, new choices, and new opportunities. Our discussions here show we're not really appreciating the subtleties of this method, and we must understand the moves better and then act more strongly, lest more of this disturbing historical parallel work itself out. Thank you.
Great, Dr. Harmon. Thank you very much for your presentation. And to our Team Krulak community, once again, we hope you enjoyed this special content with our focus on Russia and Ukraine. Please keep following us on social media and our other distribution channels, because we're going to have more coming to cover this situation in the weeks to come. And we hope it proves useful for your own thought and education and discussion. Thank you.
Education is what's important. Training, preparation for the expected. Education, preparation for the unexpected.